Joining us here today, we've got in the room, we've got Andrew Turner, the chair of Te Toi Mahana. We've got Jita Hikuroa. Cool. And we've got Catherine, who you'll all be familiar with, and Angelique, who you'll all be familiar with, but with the new title of CEO, which is very exciting. Councillors, we're going to have a presentation, but I will be saving all the partai till later. So if anything comes up, just pop your hand up and we'll put you on the list for later. Go away.
Cool. Kia ora, councillors. So today is just an opportunity for us, the three of us, to give you an update on how the CHP transition is going. It's the first of two briefings that you'll have about the transition. We'll do another one in June once we're a little bit further along and closer to day one of operating. So we'll just walk you through today where we're at in our transition plan, and there's an opportunity for you to ask questions of me from the council side or either Andrew or Angelique from the trust side. We'll just get a couple of intros out of the way first, and then we'll kind of kick into it.
So kia ora koto. I'm Andrew Turner, the chair of Te Toi Mahana, appointed by yourselves late last year. Delighted to be in the role. And yeah, certainly very pleased to be able to present the progress that we've made since that time to you this afternoon. The introductions have been made, but I'd just like to comment how delighted we are to have Angelique as our brand new Chief Executive. There's a lot of continuity that Angelique brings in that role, having headed up your housing unit here at Wellington City Council. And it's fair to say we're underway already, and absolutely delighted to have Angelique on board. Jetta, who's sitting in the public gallery this afternoon, is our board advisor, but I've got to say has done way more than advising the board. She's carried the can on many work streams that you'll be hearing about this afternoon, and we're very thankful for the huge amount of work that she's done. I'd also acknowledge work that's been done by Catherine and the team at the Wellington City Council as well. Again, a huge amount of work going on supporting the transition work streams that you'll hear about this afternoon, and work that gives me confidence that we will be in a good position to stand this organisation up on the 1st of July, and work that gives me confidence that the relationship between the Trust and the Wellington City Council will be in a good space once we're up and operating as well. So that gets my acknowledgements out of the way, but you know, I'm very thankful for a lot of good work that people are doing to make sure that we're in a good position with this.
We're going to tag team our way through the presentation, so apologies for moving the microphones around. So this is just the summary of the transition plan, which you've seen many times before in different council papers. We'll walk through in more detail as we go through this presentation, but it's just a chance to show you we're through stage one, which we completed at the end of last year, and that was when primarily we were leading this from the council side. We're now in this jointly run stage where we're working really closely together to stand the organisation up by the 1st of July, and then after then we'll move through into the trust managed new BAU. So we're in that middle line at the moment and pretty well on track.
So the Trust and Council, as I mentioned earlier, are working really well together on the transition. That work is proceeding really well. There's a huge amount of work, but we are working through it, and you'll get more detail on some of that work as we move through this presentation. All of our work at the moment is fully focused on the stand-up on the 1st of July. So there's almost a triage question with everything that comes in front of us. Do we need to have this completed by the 1st of July, or could it wait till after then? And we're almost looking at the work that we need to do in three phases. The work we must do to stand the trust up on the 1st of July, operationally, the work that we need to do to to backfill anything we haven't had the time to do by day one, so that we're running as an absolute exemplar best practice organisation. And then obviously there are longer term objectives that we'll turn our minds to after that. So we acknowledge that whilst there's a lot of work to do before the 1st of July stand-up, there will be more work to do in that first year to complete and close out the transition. So the regulator, Chara, we're keeping up with our progress. We're expecting to put our application for CHP registration in by the end of May. And again, a huge amount of work goes into that as well. The many, many different strands that come together to complete that registration documentation so that we can submit it by the end of May. There's been a good joined up approach there. We're very confident that Chara will receive the information we're providing them well, and they're very confident in the information that we're providing. So in a good space there. As you know, we're working to have the trust operational by the 1st of July. We're expecting CHP registration to be achieved in early August. However, realising that the CHP registration will come, and we're confident in that, and we'll be even more confident in that by early July, and realising that the benefit of the CHP registration is that we get the income-related rent subsidy, we're unlikely to be acquiring new IRS tenants in that first few weeks anyway. So the effect of that is minimal, as long as we're confident that we're on track to achieve CHP registration early August. All signs are that we will be. So tight time frames, huge amount of work, managing risks closely. The board are getting a transition update and looking at risk at every board meeting, and we're meeting every 2 weeks at the moment, so the whole board are across this. But really the key messages are that we're on track, there's nothing to worry about, there's a huge amount of work going into making sure that we're ready to stand up on the 1st of July.
This is just a bit of a excuse me, high-level summary of how we're thinking about our transition plan. So you'll see there we've got 6 main work streams that we're working on together, and what we're just going to do now is to take you through each of those, give you a bit of a summary about where each of those work streams are at, and just give you some of the sense of the issues and things that we're working through in each of those categories.
So, establishing the board is obviously something that was set in train by the council with the appointment of the initial trustees. Mana Whenua have appointed 2 representatives. We've just completed the governance arrangements with the appointment of 3 new trustees that now brings our total board to 9, with good diversity and a wide variety of great expertise around the table. So I'm very confident that we've got a great board in place which will be fit for purpose for setting up this organisation, but for governing it into the future as well. And I'll now hand over to Angelique, who will talk about the people change and the office space and so on.
Kia ora koutou. I think we've missed a slide, Catherine. The shared transition plan slide. That one. Oh, we did it. Oh, we just did it very quickly. Okay. All right, ignore that. Moving along. So, as we've outlined, we've confirmed...
Oh, hang on, we have got ahead in that.
Okay.
So the missed slide has caused more confusion than you might expect. So I talked about the board. The trust was settled in February between the council and those 6 trustees. Full board in place. And the only thing I need to add, actually, is the various agreements that you'll be aware of that you've taken decisions on recently. So the lease, the relationship agreements, the other formal documents, they're just been finalised and will all be in place as well.
Smooth as. We're fine now. So we do have an organisational structure, and we're moving quickly to fill the roles in that. So I started on the 14th of April. And yeah, a little bit of a hobo at the moment, sort of not being based in council and sort of floating around, trying to get everything up and running, but great support from the board and from Jetta. the board made the decision to allow the existing city housing staff to just go through a very simple EOI process rather than disestablishing roles and making people compete in the market for their jobs. So I think that was a wonderful decision, and we're really happy to say that every staff member applied for those EOIs and has been successful. So that's, yeah. So we know that was really important. Thanks, Laurie. We know that was really important to our tenants as well, and was causing some anxiety around, will my tenancy advisor still be my tenancy advisor, and that type of thing. Obviously, our staff have been in a state of limbo for over a year now, waiting for these decisions, so it's great to be able to give them that certainty that they have roles in the trust as well. We've got active recruitment out at the moment, so out on Seek and all the usual platforms for a general manager, tenancy, finance manager, finance and payroll administrator we've appointed, a comms manager and an EA for myself and the board. So they will close off on the 5th of May. So yeah, quite a bit of interest from around councils. That's been good to see. And do push those out through your networks, because we're looking to get some great people for those really important roles. And then, as you may already be aware, the Capital Works team, which is led by Peter Mora, who's in charge of things like healthy homes and housing upgrade phase 2, has moved into the infrastructure team, so reporting into Yeston Burke in Siobhan's reporting line. So that was always going to be the case, but we just moved that ahead of schedule so that team would feel supported as part of the new structure. They will eventually potentially move back to the CHP once the CHP's up and running and established. We've got a new community housing lead that's been created. It's a brand new position that sits within council, and that is to manage the relationship between council and the CHP, and there's more about that coming up on a future slide. And then staff are remaining with council right now, so they're still on level 9 in the building, and then we were still deciding on what day they will officially move over to be trust employees. Some of that is dependent on our office fit out, which is underway at the moment, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Great, thank you. Oh, me again. So yeah, just briefly, that's our structure there. All the green roles are roles that the existing team have gone into. The pinky, orangey coloured roles, what colour do you call that? Salmon? Salmon. Those roles are the ones I just talked about being advertised. And then the blue roles will be what we call phase 2. Kia ora. And phase 2 is likely to be probably June, July at the latest, to hire those GM property, GM corporate roles. And the reason they're phase 2 is they're not critical for day 1 stand up 1 July, but will be needed quite soon in the new structure. Okay, back to Catherine.
So, excuse me, as Angelique said, we're establishing this new community housing lead role here at the council to support the relationship between the trust and the council going forward. This is modelled on a very successful equivalent role in the Christchurch City Council, which has been a key part of that relationship and partnership. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. This person will be the key interface really between the trust and the council going forward. They'll also be the key person that you will see on an ongoing basis as reporting and things is coming through to the committee. This is the person who will lead that reporting on the part of the council. 4 key aspects to the role. As Andrew said, because a lot of the decisions that we're taking are focused on what's necessary for day 1, there will be quite an ongoing aspect of work around transition kind of in the first year to 18 months to close out some of those transitional arrangements that we have in place. This will be the responsibility of this person to lead that on an ongoing basis, so there's quite a bit of work in there. Key relationship manager, as I said, between the 2 organisations, responsible for monitoring all of the requirements and things under the relationship agreement, the funding agreement, the lease agreement. So this is the person who's going to be making sure that reporting is done and brought to the council. And also going to be the key connection between the council and central government on an ongoing basis, both in terms of monitoring the deed of grant, which is still in play and will be amended, but also, and more significantly, I think, working with the trust on an ongoing basis to continue to access more government funding, both in terms of IRRS access and funding for development and that sort of thing. So there'd be quite a critical three-way working relationship with central government there.
So the next work stream is setting up the new organisation. As you can see there, that's a photo I took today of our new premise. So Manor Street's a couple of doors down from the service centre, so a really great location given that that's our sort of front desk for our tenants currently. We won't be taking on a reception and a front office from day one. So that will probably come about 6 months later, and we have that agreement with the service centre and the contact centre. They'll continue to provide the exact same service for our tenants that they do now. Once we're all up and established, then we will welcome tenants in there and have officers to meet tenants there, and we'll put some signage on the service centre to say, well, 3 doors that way. So that's been really great to get such a awesome premise. It's way bigger than what we have now, and it's half the cost, so that's a bonus. It's also great for our staff. Manor Street is a great place to have lots of options around public transport, places to eat, places to have a drink, and so forth. So we're very excited, and we have engaged the fit-out people already, and they're starting work on that now. We will, of course, have a blessing for the site and give plenty of lead-in time for that. And you'll all be invited to that special day, of course. We've got all of our domains registered, so we've got a website that's up and running. We've got LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook all registered for the site. And we're just engaging with some brand and design firms this week to do that piece of work as well. And then a signage audit, because eventually all the signage, the Wellington City Council city housing signage will be replaced with Te Toi Mahana. So that brand and design work will be incorporated in that, and that's a piece where we're looking at, especially agencies that have mana whenua designers and people to link in with the name that was gifted to us by mana whenua, our tākahiri partners. I think that's about it. Just something important to note, in terms of the contact centre and the service centre supporting our tenants, they'll have a brand new number to ring, 0800 number. Finally, we get a free number for our tenants, which is great. It will go through the contact centre and it will pop up as Te Toi Mahana, so that they'll be able to answer, Te Toi Mahana, how can I help you? If they do come through the existing channel on 499 4444, it'll be answered by Wellington City Council, but we can put you through and the same people will be able to answer those questions. And as we transition to our own setup, then that will be communicated, obviously, with everybody. Cool.
Next one, work streams on CHP registration. There's a lot of work going on here, and it's basically the culmination of everything else that's going on, just documenting all of the organisational policies and decisions and strategies and things, and getting that ready to submit at the end of May. We're very grateful to the support we've had from Ōtautahi Community Housing Trust in this respect. They've basically handed over their policies to us and said, here we go, do with them what you will. So that has been exceptionally valuable in helping to expedite the process for us. The process is going to take about 60 days to go through. That's assuming that everything goes well and smoothly the first time. So our plan is to submit for registration at the end of May. It's a little bit later than we had initially hoped for, but I think still pretty exceptional given the amount of work that's going on in preparation for that. So two months there should have us registered by the beginning of August. For those who like numbers, there's a little bit of a table there that just shows the basically 60 odd pieces of documentation that have to be prepared and to be submitted. So there are about 25 of them either complete and ready or in the sign out bucket. And there's 10 very substantial new documents underway and in progress. So that includes things like the lease agreement and the funding agreement. So those things are very, very well advanced. They're just new agreements that we haven't, new documents that we haven't been able to borrow from other people. We're creating them ourselves. And then there's a further 25-ish that are either existing council policies or OCHT policies that we're reviewing and updating. So that bit of a production line going on there. Things are moving through that pipeline all the time. So reasonably well on track. Me too, yep. So, yeah, as Andrew said at the beginning, all of the decisions the board is taking and the council is taking is really filtering through this question, what's necessary to stand up a successful organisation on day one. And so as a result of that, there'll be some transitional arrangements that we'll put in place, which will mean the council is continuing to provide a level of service to the trust for the next year, 18 months or so. The reason for this is really just to provide that service continuity for tenants and to minimise the risk around that day one operation, so that when on the first day that we operate, tenants know who to call, they know who to call if something breaks in their property, they know who their tenancy advisor is, so there's no real change from a tenant perspective. And then as we'll need to kind of work through exiting those arrangements over the next 12 to 18 months or so, and part of the plan that we have to put through the registration process is to show Chara how we're going to exit those arrangements and to make sure that we're kind of moving into an arrangement where we've got two independently operating organisations. We've made sure that we're checking these arrangements with them as we go, so they're comfortable that we have these arrangements in place. They'll be specified in terms of the services that the council will provide, and they will be costed out as well. So what else do I need to say about that? Probably not much. The key areas are around IT support, so laptops and helplines and that sort of thing. As Angelique said, the contact centre and the service centre as well, so tenants can still go to the service centre and people will be able to help them there, and they'll be able to do all of the things that they can do there now, and they'll also be able to call the contact centre with that new 0800 number. The same staff will answer the calls, they will just answer with Te Toi Mahana, so there's that continuity there.
Nearly there, second to last slide. So this part, tenant engagement and feedback. So as many of you know, we've had an active tenant engagement plan for some time, probably going back a year now, where every key decision we've made has been communicated with tenants as we go. We've got a program of tenant drop-ins starting in May, and that will be advertised to all tenants. So that's basically, we'll open up community rooms, or if the complex doesn't have a community room, the nearest community centre or somewhere central for them. That will be advertised everywhere. These will be evening and weekend sessions, so people can come around childcare or bring their children and so forth. We'll obviously put some kai on, and I will be there, and Dan, who's acting in my role as City Housing Manager, will be there, and then some various other staff just to ask questions. And we found that really, really valuable throughout the big consultation we did as part of the annual plan, and we got a lot of positive feedback for that. So we're going to do that again. Our tenant feedback panel's been established now, so you remember that was a council decision to have an advisory group. So it's a tenant and stakeholder panel. We went out to the whole tenant community and all the people that work with our tenants. So we've got 30 people on that, which is great, and a really representative group of tenants, which we've struggled with a little bit in the past to have a variety of ages and a variety of backgrounds. So they've already been sent a survey to sort of talk about some ideas about what's working, what's not, what do you want to see more of, etc. So it's really good to have that up and running. Our tenancy advisors, as always, are providing the support on the ground and answering those questions. We've got a project website, which is on the council website, which gives updates on all these key transition pieces for the CHP project. The other key thing is the ceasing of taking new applications on our wait list. So that happened last Friday. We all know, we've talked about this before. It's a difficult decision, but one that had to happen. As a council, we won't be taking applications anymore, and that they'll all be coming through the public housing waitlist via MSD. And as you can see there, we're going to be working with all the applicants on our current waitlist to make sure they can access as much support as possible. So there's a separate project team for that, and they'll be engaging directly with those applicants. And we've got a project team also set up with MSD, who, we did that data match exercise, if you cast your mind back, and we know that 44% of our applicants are also on the MSD register already, and that another 45% could be eligible based on the income details that we have for them. So making sure that they are well looked after as much as possible is a key part of this transition process as well. And then tenant communications, As we touched on before, all expression of interest positions for tenancy advisors have been filled. Once they're all signed their contracts and so forth, then we'll get some comms out to our tenants. Details about rent payment changes, including MSD redirects, will be communicated. So we've nearly got a bank account set up, and currently some tenants, about a third of them, pay by redirect, so it goes straight from their account, straight from MSD into our bank account. So they're looking to do some sort of bulk upload of those. Worst case scenario, if tenants pay in the old rent account, there will be a transfer piece that it will come across to the new Te Toi Mahana account. And then just ability to take pay rent, drop in, contact staff, again, will be in place for at least 6 months. That's it.
Lucky last, there's just a bit of work to do here to close out our city housing business unit and make sure that we finish well and tidy from the council side. As we talked about before, there's a bit of work over the next couple of months just to determine when and how staff move across, and actually supporting them physically to do that with moving boxes and all of that sort of thing. There's a piece of work to do around record keeping and information transfer, make sure we have things all nice and tidy here, end of financial year, that sort of thing, and then collecting all the laptops and swipe cards on 30th of June, and that's it. Full and final, yeah. Are there any questions?
Thank you. I'm just going to pass over to one of our representatives, Councillor Matthews, to give a few words.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you all for the presentation. I just thought I would add just quickly as one of the councillor reps on Te Toi Mahana. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the excellent support that the Trust has had from council, and that's largely been due to Catherine, who's been magnificent, but Ben and others. And I think that from all of the board, we would see the excellent support that we've had to try and just sort of work together through this transitional period. Acknowledge the contribution, Andrew, that you've already made as chair, and that it's been quite an intensive period. I know it's not your first rodeo, but and to say that I'm extremely impressed with the board that we have. We've made some excellent appointments. I've been lucky enough to be part of all of those interview processes, and it really is a very highly skilled group of people. I want to acknowledge Jetta for all the work that she has done, and it's, as I say, it's been extremely. I was not aware before I took this role on how time intensive it would be, and it seems like it's been quite a major part of my life since late last year. And but when we sort of got into much more of an operational side, like for example, Jetta and I, and Andrew and Angelique, and we have been able to talk to every staff member has had the opportunity to have a chat before they move over, and it's been really a great experience. As people, I keep saying I would never normally be allowed to talk to a staff member at this level, and I understand why, but it's we've had really great conversations about and I guess it's a credit to the work Angelique has done, that there's people have felt very confident going through this process, even though it was a high level of sort of uncertainty. I'm just thrilled that we both have Angelique and have all of the staff who have relevant roles moving across. That was actually a top priority for me, so I'm very thrilled that we are in this position, and having met and talked to those people, they are wonderful people, and and I know our tenants love them, and so it is very exciting. So yes, I just wanted to acknowledge everyone and say thank you. And obviously, this, I'm not the sort of the source of truth. It's Andrew and Angelique, but that it's a great process to have been part of, and thank you.
So thanks, Rebecca. And of course, we've got Tim as the other councillor trustee as well. Intensive would be something of an understatement, I think it's fair to say. Just by way of background, I was involved with the concept, the design and the stand-up of the Otatahi Community Housing Trust in Christchurch. So when Rebecca says it's not my first rodeo, there is a sense of deja vu of having been through this before. But what that does mean is that we're able to learn from what OCHT did and implement those learnings, and we're able to avoid making some of the mistakes that were made in that process here in Wellington. So, Rebecca, thank you for your kind words and acknowledgements. Great. So, yeah, definitely happy to take some questions.
we've got Councillor Paul.
So mine are a bit random, so they're a bit like spread across the different compartments of the presentation. So my first question was around the Better Off funding that would go towards tenant support. What's going to happen with that, with the announcements by government? Do you know like what effect that's had on that funding, and is that still a solid source of income for that? And if not, you know.
Yep, so the funding that's been agreed has come through as part of what's called Tranche 1 funding, and that's locked and loaded. There's nothing that will change there. My understanding is that the question mark is over Tranche 2 funding, which might, Andrea, hopefully I'm saying that got this the right way around. The uncertainty is about Tranche 2, which is available, I think, from July 2024, but all of the money, the $6.5 million that's committed to transfer to the trust is locked and loaded and will be transferred.
Cool. And just with that rent freeze, that's due to that rent freeze we decided on that. When does that end? Is it this September or was that last September? This coming September. So what's the plan around that? Because that's obviously going to be really stressful for existing tenants getting this big rent hike, and then they're, you know, going to be like, I think, maybe confused about what's going on and all this transition. So how are we going to cushion that?
Yeah, I mean, if I talk about it from a decision-making point of view, my understanding is that there's a decision for council to make around rent increases that then would be for the trust to implement. But Angelique, you would be better to talk about, you know, our communications with tenants and maybe some of your thoughts on that matter.
So currently, every year there's the CBRE rental market rent survey done. So that's actually being undertaken at the moment, and that informs every year whether we what the market's doing and whether we need to put rents up or not. And as you know, for many years, that's been an up. I've never seen a down, but I'm sure that's possible. And then council decides whether it's the low, medium or high end of what that could possibly be. So that report is due to come in the first week of May. From that, a memo is done to ELT, which would be Kim in this instance, recommending either that low, medium or high, and then Kim will make that decision. With the rent freeze, it's a little bit different this year, because to give the rent freeze will come off in September, which is normally the annual rent increase time. And to do the rent increase in September, you need to give tenants 3 months' notice. So tenants need to have a letter in June, which means that still council are still running the housing operation in June, whether they're going to do one or not. So where I see it, there's three options. There's council makes a decision to do a rent increase in September, as per the usual, issues a letter and the CHP implements that in September. Council decides that they don't want to go with the current cycle and want to defer that decision, and that would probably need to be a joint, discussion between the CHP and council, because the conversations we've had is, as council, as your last action to give a rent increase is, I know I've heard from some people that's not what they want to do, but also for the CHP as the first action to be day one and doing a rent increase is similarly, not great. So the third option is potentially shifting the annual rent increase cycle. So you could do, say, March or April next year to align with the ARL cycle, the Affordable Rent Limit Subsidy, because we're already collecting tenant details at that time, and just do a one and done type scenario. What that does mean for the CHP is potential lost revenue between September and March, but a decision has to be made either way very, very soon, because our tenants do want to know what happens in September and are already asking that. So there's a few factors to consider there.
And sorry, just my last question was around, so say someone comes to us or to you guys and they need housing, but they don't meet the criteria of the, they're not prioritised with the MSD criteria. Are you guys like having conversations with Te Kāinga, the affordable housing program, to make sure that there is somewhere to send them? Because I would hate for them to just be like, sorry, you're not a priority, go find housing somewhere else, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would have on our website, in our offices, even at the service centre, you know, if you earn too much for the public housing wait list, which, you know, a lot of people do, then Te Kāinga would definitely be somewhere we would be talking to them about. We're already doing that with some of our applicants on the wait list and have a few moving in. So that's really good. But yeah, it's obvious pipeline for some people.
So that communication's happening.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Kia ora. Thanks for the presentation coming in today. Two things. First, my ears perked up on this developing of the branding. I guess in former lives I've been involved in those exercises. They can get really expensive. So can you talk a bit more through why the decisions down that path? And, you know, is it going to be something that's going to be quite expensive, or just what the thinking is to that decision?
We're not at the stage of having quotes yet. So we've gone out to 3 agencies so far. We're obviously a charitable trust at the end of the day, not a big, you know, brand corporate that has, you know, lots and lots of money to spend. But there's also that thought that we've discussed that, you know, we've been part of council for 60 years. You know, we are coming out as a brand new entity, and it's really important to differentiate, you know, this and our story going forward. So it's not the case of just getting a Wix website, you know, for 3K and mocking up a brand. We've also been gifted Te Toi Mahana by Takai Here Partners, and so we want obviously our story and our branding to reflect that. So some of it's going to be around timeframes as well. You know, we're on a really tight schedule here to get that through. So we've got a board meeting on Friday, which I hope to have the first 3 quotes come through, and then it will be a discussion from there. You know, we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars by any means, but want it to be special because it's going to be all our signage, you know, all our social media, everything going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate there's a bit of a tension there, but also I guess you're not a private enterprise competing, so I guess just as a council I'd hope prudence is a overwhelming virtue there. Second question, coming from CCO land, so is Smart Council the move to be permanently integrated, or are you looking to split off your IT in time to stand up alone?
We'll split off in time. You know, they've committed to support us for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
But like a lot of our contracts, we'll be reviewing them, you know, once we get through that first year, everything from cleaning to, you know, hosted systems and so forth. But Smart Council have been fantastic with us and supporting us so far.
Yeah, I guess just given the experience of Experience Wellington who are coming back in, because this has actually become such a liability, that would be something to be mindful of, I suppose.
Might be good to have a chat about that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman. And we do have a few people on the waiting list, so I'll just ask that you keep to brief questions, please.
Cool. Thank you. First of all, it's lovely to see you taking that role. It's great. It gives some kind of assurance the community going to be looked after because of the good job you have already done. And it's also good to see the staff members have got stability. That's really very important. My question would be the new community housing lead role. Is that employed by Wellington, by us, or by you? If that is the case, what kind of legitimacy and power do they have to come and ask you for a reporting to bring it back?
I mean, this goes back to some of the comments that I made in the presentation about the governance arrangements. So the initial trustees were appointed by the Wellington City Council, and then 2 councillors were appointed as trustees, and then 2 mana whenua trustees were appointed, and then the trust itself has appointed a further 3 trustees. So what you've got is an independent trust, which is a separate entity than council. For all, the trust deed has been signed by council and the initial trustees were appointed by council, and the regulator will be looking at us operating quite clearly and quite deliberately at arm's length from the council. There are rules that the regulator has got around the separation of the function from council. Having said that, my expectation is that we will always have a good relationship with the Wellington City Council. There's a relationship agreement, which again is a document which has come past yourselves as councillors, which sets out the way that that relationship will be, the way the relationship will be held, the briefing and reporting requirements and so on. So we'll certainly be operating with that. But my expectation is that, it's the Wellington City Council that set us up. You've set us up for success. The regulator has got some requirements, but within that environment, I'd like us to have a close, open, transparent relationship, to be reporting according to that relationship agreement. And, in my world, as the chair of the trust, what I want is for all of the councillors around this table to be confident in the work that we're doing, and to be speaking positively about it.
Yep, that's great. I think that's what we need to be pushing for. And currently we don't have a reporting system where councillors who are appointed to whether to CCOs or any other boards, and there is no ways we can be forcing them as well. Is that something that can come through the councillors unless they report it back to us? We don't have that system currently. So is that something that you guys consider, or are we just expecting them willingly to report it back? I think it's a bit tricky. So
I would see, I would see Rebecca and Tim as wearing two hats. One of which is city councillor at the Wellington City Council, and one of which is as a council-appointed trustee of an independent charitable trust, which is Te Toi Mahana. Your expectations and requirement for report back from those two people that you've appointed, that's a matter for discussion at this table, I think it's fair to say. But, we get the benefit of the significant knowledge that both of those councillor trustees have got brought to our table, and we get the nuance of discussions that have happened at council and what might be acceptable and what might not, what might be a hot potato that we should deal with particularly sensitively, and so on. Both Tim and Rebecca bring significant benefit to our board table, and it's great to have two councillors there. Report back the other way obviously would be a matter for you to discuss, but I see those two people as having two quite separate roles in terms of the work that they do here and the work that they do at our board table.
Deputy Mayor Fern.
Mine's a sneaky comment. Can you thank Christchurch City Council and say that we really appreciate them sharing their policies, please?
I've already spoken to Kate Kearney, who's the chief executive there, and to Alex Skinner, who's the chair. I've got to say both were absolutely delighted to be able to help, and I'm actually going to shout them a morning tea to say thank you.
Right. Paenga-whāwhā.
Kia ora, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick one. You mentioned there's a bit of a delay, I think, between go live and accreditation from the CHRA. Can you talk a bit about perhaps any risks associated with that and maybe how you might manage those risks?
We don't see this as being a major risk in play, particularly because these things are going to actually happen quite closely together. We're not anticipating that we're going to be waiting a long time for registration. I think it's important to note that to be operational, that means we have to have a fully signed lease agreement that the council signs and the trust signs. So we don't start operation with nothing. We have this very significant set of agreements that have been through the council and have been through the board, and they will all have to be signed up and operational in order for that day one to happen. And then the registration is really about that access to that IRRS funding. I think if we had a more significant gap between day one operation and when we expected registration to be coming through, we'd need to think about that a bit more carefully, but we're pretty well on track to get that through at the end of May, so we don't think there's much risk there. Yep.
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks for coming in. I'm just wondering if there's any risk of the Trust coming back to Council to ask for more funding, particularly in things like earthquake strengthening?
I think I think it's important to remember that the buildings are owned by council. So any major maintenance that's required, say seismic strengthening, would need to come from council. So the CHP wouldn't be coming back to ask for that.
Yes. Andrew, I didn't support this change, and this is exactly one of the reasons why I didn't. Have you also just looked in your risk register about any changes in government policy too that would impact on tenants?
Yeah, changes in government policy that would impact on tenants and changes in government policy, given that we've got a general election coming up in the next little while, that would impact on the CHP model and the setup of entities like this. And I think it's worth remembering that this particular model was National Party policy, which has largely been implemented by the Labour government over the two terms. If we ended up with a change of government, if there was change in tenancy legislation, that would obviously affect tenancies across the board, both private and through this sort of entity. I mean, my view would be the chances of too much of that being rolled back would be minimal. But what I do think about is, would there be a change to the model as a result of a change of government? Given that this model was National Party policy in the beginning, I'd be very surprised if there was. And it may be that other changes around opportunities or maybe changes to regulations that encouraged more public-private partnerships or opportunities for third-party investments could actually enhance the model rather than detracting from it.
That causes me a bit of alarm too. And just the last question, I understand not all tenants are getting the IRRS, that's right. Are you doing any lobbying around that, or is it just you wouldn't consider that appropriate?
Talking about as a CHP, do you mean? Yeah. I mean, the CHP sector as a whole, LGNZ, I should say, firstly, as a whole, lobbied for IRRS. As you know, our council, put forward a letter asking Minister Woods for IRRS, and we had our tenant campaign as well. All answers have all led to the same place, which is no. So, we will go ahead. The current state is what you last heard, Councillor Paenga, is all our existing tenants go across on same terms and conditions they have now, won't get IRRS. New tenants coming in will get, eligible tenants get IRRS, and that's the current state. I can't see any change in that policy, at least this side of the election.
Right. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I missed the first part of the presentation, so you might have already covered this. But I'm really interested in the dollars in terms from a WCC, how much we what we're intending to put in and what we budgeted for. Is that still tracking along those lines, or if it's changing? I'm thinking in particular for our next annual plan and our long-term plan coming up. Are the figures what we thought they were going to be? Have they adjusted? And how are we building that into our own budgets?
So you'll remember we have provided for $2 million worth of establishment funding over this year and next year. We are still tracking under that $1.5 million for this year, so no issues there. That $500,000 is in the budget for next year as well. The other funding that's there and provided for is the $23 million worth of capitalisation money, which will go out according to some phasing that we'll need to work through together. And the HUP 2 budget is also a council funding commitment, which is already in the LTP as well.
Okay, so it's still in line with all of that?
Still in line
with what we've got. Mm-hmm. And when will that next be relooked at or adjusted, or is that done regularly on a monthly, quarterly basis as you develop up the CHP?
The CHP will need to develop its own operating budget that gets submitted for registration. And I'm assuming the board and things will look at that regularly as they're doing at the moment. We're tracking the council establishment funding closely because obviously it's limited. and we're looking at that probably weekly or fortnightly. Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any risk there.
Cool. Lucky last, Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yes, kia ora. I was just hoping Councillor Brown might be able to give us some affirmations on how he's going with the board and what do you see going into the future?
I decided to mention I find the council policy of not paying directors who are councillors extremely unfair and unreasonable, but so can we just put that in the minutes? Look, I have to say, I think the quality of people around the board table is just truly outstanding. I think we've got a great team. So Andrew has managed to, obviously his animal magnetism has attracted the smartest people in the room. So, and I think all the evidence is that, Angelique is also fully understands the space brilliantly. The fact that she's managed to get basically everybody to migrate across is tremendous. The one thing that I would really put in front of you guys, and I know that you're worried about money and stuff like that, but the building team, Paul Conda's team is still within council rather than part of the CHP, and I think that's a mistake to have that 2 arms length. I mean, the CHP obviously has a couple of functions here, one being obviously to look after its tenants and do it efficiently, the other, and to also access government funding. But we also want to upgrade the properties as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and I think we need to be as integrated as possible with the people who will be running that as we can make that, and I don't think it's a smart move for you guys to have that group of people in council and sort of externally liaising. So hopefully that's a structural change that we can make, and we can migrate the team across to join Angelique's team. So otherwise, I think I've just been so impressed by how quickly and efficiently everything has been done, given, I mean, Jetta has done an incredible job of just the sheer scale of complexity of setting up. This is $1 billion enterprise, so don't kid yourself about its scale, and there's an enormously large amount of complexity, and so far so good, so I'm very impressed.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I would like to extend a warm thank you for all of the work that each and every one of you have done in setting this up and coming in to talk to us today. Catherine, Angelique, Jita and Andrew, really appreciate that. We still have a few minutes. If you've got any closing comments, or perhaps, or Kim, you might like to mention next we expect to hear from the CHP or an update on this.
Well, Catherine will be able to tell me when we're next hearing from the CHP, but tomorrow all councillors are invited to Te Papa for a farewell for our city housing team, which will be a great opportunity just to say thank you to them as they depart the organisation. Another thing very quickly, Angelique doesn't even know this, but one of the highest employee engagement scores within council, city housing. So 78%, which is absolutely brilliant, and Angelique's leadership is 82%, which is great. So just shows the team that you have and the team that you're essentially taking on is, really good.
Can I just add too that survey was out after staff consultation had started and everyone was being disestablished, worrying about their jobs. So I didn't want the survey to go ahead. So I was worried that, it would not reflect well, and it went up from last year. So yeah, I'm really pleased. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Angelique.
And when I say that we were delighted to be able to recruit Angelique, your housing unit manager as our chief executive, I'm equally delighted that so many staff from your very successful and recognised as successful housing unit are coming over to the Trust as well. That's going to give us the foundations of a really good team of staff, and I think a really good culture as well as we build a new organisation. I've met a lot of those people over the last week or so. Some really interesting conversations, some very committed people, particularly the people that are working front on with tenants, a huge amount of knowledge about the people that they're working with. I'm just delighted that we're going to be able to bring all of that over to the Trust as we start work. So thanks to Angelique for running a really good process from both sides, actually. It's great.
Kia ora. Thank you, Andrew. Councillors, we've got about 5 minutes. Don't go too far. We've got the Te Kāinga housing update.